Hello everybody and welcome to another week of Tryhard Tuesdays, where we learn to try a little bit harder, but hopefully not too hard with this episode because we're going to be discussing accessibility. I'm sitting here with my every-time co-host, Mr. Blue. How's it going, Mr. Blue?
I'm feeling good as the every-time co-host. That's
yeah.
Nice intro you added there. Ooh.
It's always something to suggest that you're always around. You know, you're a permanent fixture.
Just like an STD that just won't go away, right?
Right, but it makes you turn into a ginger or something.
I am your herpes, Wazoo.
All right. Well,
you and I just need to bond, all right? You need to accept me for what I am, and no amount of chemicals or medicine will put me at bay, okay?
Okay. Well, I don't think that's exactly how it works, but
that's exactly how it works.
But
direct correlation.
Big times in Dota. Big times indeed, right? I mean, we got the big team shuffle, lots of criticism towards the major lock-in system from some sources, such as Nahaz and other people. So we've had that development on the drama front. But another big thing is the spring cleaning update that just came out, and it managed to create a ton of bugs and fix some stuff. So
the spring cleaning that made some stuff dirtier, yeah.
It's the basic idea here is they like dusted the rug in the house, you know, and like just released all that dust and all those bugs in the house. And that house is, of course, Dota 2. But they also made some really good changes that made me think that they're kind of moving towards the right mindset in terms of mechanics. As people probably already know, you can now toggle spawn boxes and tower range, and also what unit the tower is attacking. So we're going to be spending a lot of time discussing, is Dota a game that has too much of a learning curve? Is it something that deters players because it takes thousands of hours to, you know, be versed in the game? Or is it a place that, you know, we want to see it now? Does it have a lot of its mystique due to the fact that it is indeed a very difficult game to learn, you know? And right. I don't know. Let's start by talking about some of those changes, what they mean for the game, and what your opinions are, Blue, because I don't think I've exactly talked to you about it yet, so I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, sure. So just to get into some of the changes, I mean, I might be missing a few, but I think the big ones that a lot of people are recognizing now is that you can see the exact vision of towers and their attack range by just alt-clicking. Or I think if you just
hold alt.
I think it's if you hold alt, it shows a couple things. I don't know does it show the tower attack range as well? Because I know it also shows that when you hover over the tower, I think, or click on the
I think
tower.
you can click on it and it'll show you, and then if you're just in range, you can hold alt and it'll show you the range, and then it'll also show you what unit it's attacking.
That's right. Okay, so there's that, and then when you also hold alt, you have the option now to also see the neutral spawn camps in the exact, you know, geometry that they are, because I don't know if everyone knows, but if you're new to Dota, each spawn box has kind of its own unique geometry to it. Some are, you know, more rectangular, some are kind of more obtuse and very kind of long and narrow. They each have their own little unique area, so it's not like every spawn box is a perfect square. So that's something that is another big change and helps a lot with those support players who are looking to stack, who are looking to de-ward if they notice that their camp has been warded, how they can de-ward it safely, things like that. So I think those are the two big ones that we're covering. I think they added some other things like to allow for like quick casting and hero specific abilities.
Seems like greatly broken right now from what I'm reading, though. Like some of that stuff, like it's not work. Like they work alone, the quick cast and the whatever the other feature is. What is it? It's quick cast and
it's like hero specific abilities that you can use hotkeys for, like your own hotkey setup for, which is cool. So I mean, eventually once all the bugs for it are fixed, it seems like it's just a nice little value add kind of thing for the people who are really into their hotkeys and stuff. But I think the first two are like probably the big two talking points that everyone seems to be going on about. So,
and you get a lot of kind of on the fence people, I feel like I honestly think the changes are fantastic. I think anything that takes out, like as you said, the obtuseness is a good thing. I mean, and I remember just for my first several hundred hours of Dota being completely oblivious to what a spawn box even was, because it wasn't, there's no explanation, you know? there's so much in this game that does make sense. I mean, last hitting is a mechanic. It makes sense. You know, dying under tower, it makes sense. All this stuff makes sense. But I've been a long time critic of stacking and pulling as something that just doesn't make sense in terms of the game. It doesn't, there's no sequitur to that type of behavior that you would just be like, oh, unless you like discover it yourself. You know what I mean?
It's discovery, and I think that's central to the argument of one side over the other, as opposed to as in determining whether or not these are changes that people, welcome with open arms, as opposed to go, wait, what the hell is this? Like, that was part of the fun for me, was learning all of these things. Why would you take that away from someone who is, starting out and being, slapped on the wrist every time they forget one of these things because they haven't learned them yet,
Yeah.
So I don't know. So you seem to be in the camp where it's like you should be making this clear to someone, and you should be conveying it to them in a way so they know. Is that a fair estimate?
Yeah. I think if every spawn box had the exact same behavior and the exact same range and the exact same geometry, then I would be a lot less critical of it. But as it stands, someone can throw up a sentry or something to block a camp, and you really kind of just needed to either see them or get pretty lucky, at least if you're a lower level player.
I was going to say, like, that you can get better at that because it is divided up into, like when you're dewarding the Radiant, easy camp, like, it's kind of cut down two different paths. Is, if you put your sentry on one side of the camp, you can cover one half of it. You put your sentry on the other side, you cover the other half. But you're right in that it's something that you really would have to take your time and watch some video that, like, a PPD makes and explains to you before you really can competently deward these kind of things. And even then it's difficult because they may have stuck it in the trees somewhere in some fancy place. And so, yeah, I'm with you there, and I agree that for the spawn boxes especially, it's something that it is so unique to Dota that is a thing as it is. And then you add on top of that fact that each of them has a different spawn box. I mean, I've played, I don't know, like over 2,000 hours on this game, and even I can't remember always exactly which way I should be pulling, to stack like the Radiant hard camp of the jungle, right? Do I need to make sure I'm just always pulling sideways, or can I get away with pulling straight down? So it is something that it's really difficult as it is for even experienced players to do. So it just makes it that much easier for someone who's trying to get better acquainted with the game. But
what do you think of the interface, though? I mean, Dota used to be a game that, I don't know, the only thing going on the map, or the only thing you saw interface-wise, was like creep health bars, tower health bars, your heroes, and stuff like that. Do you feel like it's too cluttered of experience if you're adding like all these like
hold click?
Yeah, like all these kind of strange tutorial things. I mean, it doesn't look like the same Dota, and I think that's why people get a little bit irritated about it or something, is just because it feels like, I already know this, so why should it help other people? And it just takes up space on the screen. Like, do you feel like that's a valuable way to go about it?
I don't think so, and I think anyone who kind of makes that argument is a little bit on the silly side, because all of it can be turned off for your own experience. So if it's like, if you're not comfortable with it and it's too much clutter for you, you can always turn that ability off. I think it's something you even have to enable to be able to use. I'm not sure if by default it allows.
It does not. Or at least it did not for me.
Alt-clicking box. Yeah. So I don't know. To me, that's kind of unnecessary, because, like, if someone wants to have all the clutter in the world, they should have that option. The customizability in terms of the settings and stuff, it used to be so much more difficult to do all these things. You have to get your own auto config file to be able to right click allied creeps to deny them, stuff like that. Do you remember those days where you'd have to have your own little text file? I mean, I
never did it personally, but
I did it because it was.
That's a big thing in Valve games, I feel like, is that auto exec type stuff.
Yeah, which is cool for if you're like really, really deep into the nitty gritty, but I bet that only consists of about 10 to 15% of the Dota population. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are fit into that category, but if you're listening to a Dota 2 podcast, you probably aren't part of the casual fan base that will play, once every couple weeks a game of Dota 2. So I just I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing that we're going away from that, but I don't think it's a bad thing either. I just think it's a change that makes sense for making a game more accessible and making it easier for new people to learn the game. I mean, I've introduced this game to. I think what would be interesting is for us to talk about how our experience has been introducing the game to other people who and how they've taken it, whether they've taken the game and they've run with it, or whether they've played a little bit and then stops, things like that. And I think that's a good barometer for what we can gauge as accessibility issues versus not.
That sounds like a great kind of next leg of our conversation, is that introduction, because I don't know if you guys have heard of these like internet guys, Roland and Cyphus, but I introduced them to Dota after badgering them for like I think a year, and they're just like, not my type of game, not my type of game. And I'm like, you don't know if it's your type of game, is like what I kept telling them. But watching them learn the game, it's pretty painful to see like try to explain some of this stuff, because really the only way that you can get so comfortable to be able to stack a camp or pull correctly or stay out of spawn boxes when the minute ticks over, all this stuff, you get it wrong for so long until you get it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you're spending hundreds of hours getting it wrong, and people yell at you or something in your pubs, and you'll ignore them probably if they're yelling at you, or you'll try it yourself, and eventually you'll get it right. And so you replicate that mechanic. What I really like with these is that it just takes out a bit of the guesswork. I mean, the mechanics are still there. You still got to get the mechanics down, but at least at this point you can be like, I don't stand in these green lines when the minute ticks over, And so I just wish these features were around like when I was learning to play, because I think it more hard codes that what you should be doing in those spaces. It hard codes that into your mechanics, and it does so very well, I would think. Of course I don't know because I have all my bad habits, but it just seems very straightforward comparatively.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's a like there's the games in like MOBAs in general, and especially Dota 2, which has like the biggest, I don't know, I think people generally consider that it to have the biggest learning curve of any of the popular MOBAs, and that's because it's like when you learn, and even a game like StarCraft, a game as complex as StarCraft, just to take from a game that both you and I have a lot of experience in, and Cyphus and Roland as well, when you learn in that game, it's like if you mess up a build order and you play against someone, it's in a very quick vacuum that you can restart the game and and analyze your own play on a much faster level than you can with Dota, because with Dota you have 10 different people doing different things all at the same time. And so if your enjoyment of the game, like as the more experienced player, is dependent upon your newer friend knowing these things that you never would have known, without some help from someone, it makes it a very difficult relationship on the master apprentice level. Whereas in StarCraft, you can go 1v1 and you can say, oh, I see your build order was this, and that. Or I see you had, four stalkers at the 6-minute mark, and that, you needed 6 to really go take high ground with me, or stuff like that. So it's much easier to identify your mistakes and improve as a player on like a more try-hardy level, and trying to appreciate the game at a higher level. In either those strategy games, or even if we're talking CS:GO, in terms of accessibility, that's right off the bat, it's more accessible because first-person shooters in general are more accessible. It's at like a very base level. You understand.
Shoot the guy.
I shot this guy. I did something good. I'm just going to see what exactly he did that was so good that made him the better player than me. But at a very basic level, it is, get the kill, get the objective, take the position correctly, things like that. So
it's interesting because I feel like CS:GO is a pretty interesting comparison, because all of those maps do have nuances and stuff, and you're greatly rewarded for like using some of those nuances. Like if you watch pro players like dinking over walls and stuff and like still hitting people, like those are like the spawn boxes of CS:GO. I feel like it's like these little nooks and crannies that can gain you an advantage. But the thing with Dota is if you have one team that is stacking and another that isn't, the team that stacks is going to probably win, And so to have it be an obtuse process for players to get into and not have it be part of the fundamentals of their game was probably something Valve was looking at, just to be like, okay, this is a huge part of the game, and it is. It's a huge part of the game for every position, pretty much, by this point. But it wasn't treated as such. It wasn't treated as such, it feels like, for the longest time. It was just like a old boy's secret or something. Like, that's how I felt about it. Maybe I'm just noob. But
so I have a question for you as the master to the Roland and Cyphus' apprentice. What did you focus on when you first started talking to them about the game? Like, what is there? Do you remember what heroes you had them picking, or what kind of general concepts you were trying to convey to them, and what was like the big barriers at the start? Do you remember that? It's fresh in my memory because I have a couple of friends who I've been showing it to who are like just getting back into PC gaming.
With Roland, it was like items and stuff. Like with Cyphus, he always pretty much built like whatever he thought was like you could convince him what was good. But Roland, it was like. Mm-hmm. The no boots prophet and stuff. Yeah. That it's like, no, this is really good. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, people have been making fun of this type of play for, like, the years I've been playing this game. Like, this is, like, literally a joke,
Wazoo, this item does damage. Why would you not get this item?
It's like, you can get it, but just wait a bit, bud. It's like...
Shoots a laser beam.
And
Who
so...
wouldn't want that?
I mean, you see all this automated type of process, in a way, with the item builds... and stuff like that, even skill builds that was added in. So, like, there's this huge automated thing going on in Dota where you can really just... They want someone to just be able to hop into a game and play and not have to worry about, like, blocking a bunch of camps or building completely wrong items because they don't have a guide. I believe it was Gorgon that told me Dota 1, people always built ridiculous items, and it'd be hard to find a game sometimes, and people would just build whatever the hell because there was absolutely no roadmap of, like... what's a good item build, you know what I mean? And like, sure, some of those builds are so wrong even still. Like, look at the Void one. Like, the default one is still old Void, that was carry Void. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they're like kind of automating it is good on one hand. On the other hand, I feel like with some players they just need to kind of rough through it. Like, you look at Roland, he's a way better player than he was a year ago, and that's because he has had that trial and error and he's been very hard-headed about it. But I don't see him really following item builds or skill builds. He just kind of does what feels right, And I guess the big reward there is you win sometimes and you say, okay, well, this worked. And like you said, you watch the replay, you do that whole thing, and maybe you can eventually rationalize why this item build is this way or why it was at some point. And so I feel like these new changes help players to rationalize these obtuse behaviors. And tower hits and stuff can feel pretty obtuse. They can feel like, oh, what? It was attacking the creep and then it switched to me. Like, why? And you don't know why in the beginning because you can't see like what's going on or whatever. You don't understand the mechanics of that tower.
Yeah. I can tell you as a guy who's been teaching a couple friends of mine who are, they've played, your Diablos, they've played your civilizations. They're not like micro intensive games, but they get the kind of top down approach, the overhead style play, and they understand it at a base level, like moving your guy around, right clicking to move him, right clicking on an enemy to attack him, stuff like that. Just general, like I would call it like navigation of a MOBA. And I think the biggest difficulty for them is things like lane equilibrium and the strength, being able to measure the strength of one hero as opposed to the other, which is such a critical skill to have in Dota, and one that just takes dozens and hundreds of hours to really understand what hero works well, knowing all the abilities. And I think that while we can make it accessible for a lot of these smaller things, what I'm hearing a lot of us talking about is that we're talking about making things accessible for the player who's already put in those 250, 300 hours, and they're just trying to get to that next step where they know all the basics, they know what all the heroes' abilities do, they have a general sense of who is good as a carry versus who is good as a support, in general, and it's just taking that extra step. And I feel like a lot of these tools that they're adding are built for that kind of person. And what I'd like to know is, to ask Valve is, what are you doing for those people that are at hour 2 instead of hour 200.
Right. You might not
And
even know those options are available in the menu, like when you come in.
exactly.
So
You
it's
wouldn't
like,
even know if
yeah.
you're 2 hours into the game. You're too busy trying to figure out what the hell you're doing because there's no single player guide. There's a little like like a half hour
Dragon Knight
45
tutorial.
Yeah,
Is that
the
what you're talking
DK
about?
tutorial that
Yeah.
no one likes playing. It's boring to play. I mean,
And
I
it's
guess
not a good representation of the game, like
right.
honestly at all. Like it's not a single player like click fest. You know,
Well, the
it's not
problem is if
Diablo.
you're gonna, I think I don't take issue with the fact that it's just not even the same game mode. I'm okay with it not being the same game mode. You look at any other game that's sort of on this complex level. You look at a StarCraft. You even look at like Call of Duty games. Like, what's the first thing people got into before Call of Duty was a big thing? The campaign. The basic concept of the game is still there. The right clicking to attack, the using of abilities, the matchups against heroes, tower aggro. These are all things that they could be implementing in like a first player tutorial that's more extensive and furthermore fun to play. And I just don't see that. Like I asked my friend to like try out the DK thing, and he looked back and he's like, "What am I doing? Like how is this fun?" And I told him like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, this is just the shitty part of playing this game right now. The first, 3 hours of this game is just boring and dull, and you don't know what's going on. But once you see it in action, you'll start to pick it up. Like, you'll start to appreciate what's going on, and maybe you won't understand everything, but you'll see and appreciate when someone does something really awesome because you'll be able to recognize it. But up until that point, it just isn't fun, and I just wish that when we talk about our accessibility conversation that we are not forgetting the fun factor, because it has to be fun to draw people in, and that's the most accessible tool of all, right? Is just making a fun game and then making a more in-depth and interesting game.
It's interesting because I know people that would do those tutorials for free, kind of like they do those sets and stuff for free, set design, Like I know people would do that if Valve just opened the door and was like, we're now, taking suggestions for a type of tutorial that's maybe like an hour to 2 hours that gets people versed in all the different obtuse game mechanics before they even play. And so you play that before you unlock anything, like everything else would be locked on the new account. And you'd go through that and it would teach you all these things about pulling and lane equilibrium and why it's advantageous to have the lane equal or pulled back or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or when it's a good time to push. Because I see so many people, even at my skill level, that they think a pull is just pulling that small camp, and they don't understand that they're pushing the lane right after that when they don't get rid of the creeps. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just like
the
stuff
extra
like that.
concept of the second pull, the pull through,
or just stacking it twice.
Sense.
Stacking and then pulling. Like I see people that don't really grasp that concept. Like they're checking it off of a list. And I think support is a mechanically obtuse position in a lot of ways. Almost more than a carry. I mean, probably way more in ways.
And the game itself is designed to really force the newer players into that role. When you I would love to know what the statistics are behind how people got into Dota and whether or not it was related to a friend showing them. Because I feel like I'm actually the exception to the rule. I didn't have a Dota friend, quote unquote, that was really into it. I had one of my buddies who tried out the beta key that I had and was having some fun with it whenever I wasn't, but he was just kind of passively enjoying it, and I was like, yeah, whatever, I'm too busy playing StarCraft 2. And then later on down the road, I saw, TI2, and then at the start of TI3, I really got into it, but it was really my own motivation to play and get interested in this game. But I feel like a lot of people that I talk to, at least anecdotally, have said that the reason they got into the game is because their friend was into it, right?
Yeah.
And when you're playing with your friend, I mean, perfect example, you and Cyphus. I'm sure when he started out, you're like, hey, try Lich, or try Venge, or try one of these support heroes, because then you and I can be in a lane together, right? And at that basic level, it forces that kind of relationship to develop. And I wonder if they can build more tools around those kind of relationships, like a special mode for a co-op buddy mode, where you just have a lane. It's just the lane, you and your buddy.
That's interesting.
Learning to play.
That's an interesting concept. And I've thought for years that they should do some type of tutor mentorship thing to get rid of low prio. Imagine if you had 5 low prio games, and you, instead of going and doing the ridiculous circus that is low prio and trying to win, you could sit and play a game with somebody. And at the end, if they mark you with 5 stars, it gets rid of 1 game. you know? And it's always random or something like that. Like, these little things could help a lot in terms of the community. Like, of course, it's a system that could be abused. Or
It's like Dota 2 community service.
Yeah, pretty much, man. Like, I feel like you're getting. I guess they are already abusive players, but like, and the idea does need a little work. But
Yeah.
it's like,
I
feel like
concept,
the
but you
biggest.
make it a community-driven thing.
Yeah,
where people
exactly.
have to
That's
help
how
each other
knowledge
to-
is spread in this game. It's a communal thing. Like the analogy you used earlier about an STD, it's a very communal thing to sit down and share information, or like, don't do this because this happened to me, kind of thing. And I feel like that's one thing that's lacking in a way, is like, sure, you can share the guides and all that,
Yeah.
but there's this level of detachment when you're going to read a Leaf Eater guide or something like that.
Yeah.
You're not talking directly to Leaf Eater or someone who's done it before. You know what I mean? And so,
Right,
like,
it lives in a vacuum. It doesn't
Right.
apply to every scenario, and then you as a player get that kind of pass on yourself. You're like, oh, well, this guy was a feeder, and therefore my stacking, which I did a terrible job of, doesn't matter because he's bad. And then it kind of creates that toxicity that a lot of people talk about with Dota. You know, where it's a passing of the blame, and you start down that road, and it's hard to get off it for a lot of folks. So I'm with you there. I think that there need to be more. I think something we're agreeing, with for each other, is that there need to be more game modes, and there need to be more ways for someone to interactively learn. And I feel like there's not a lot of what you would call like edutainment in Dota 2, outside of YouTube videos and things like that. There should be more in the game that makes you a better player, but also is more entertaining than being DK and right clicking the same fucking creeps for 2.5 minutes.
it really makes no sense. It's like the least Dota 2 thing ever.
You
in a way.
you have a bad you have a poorly designed tutorial where, like, I have a family friend of ours he's about 13. He's interested in Dota because he knows that I love it. He's like, let me play the game, and he's learning it, and he's going through that tutorial, and it took him like 3.5-4 minutes to realize that you need to do this specific thing. You need to like move up to this specific spot before the creeps stop automatically spawning, in that little like DK area, where instead of farming creeps with the coddle, you need to go up and like hit something. I can't remember what the example was, but it was so, the fact that the tutorial itself was so unintuitive was like kind of emblematic of what the problem is in Dota in terms of accessibility, is that you just don't have anything for those people at the 0 to 50 hour mark to really latch onto. There's no meat to go into. Like, well, I have no idea what I'm doing, but at least I can go to the single player and have some fun. Right?
Yeah.
There's custom games, which is great, and I wonder if maybe that's the route that they need to take. I don't know. Have you tried getting anyone into the custom game scene? I know. What about Roland's wife? Has she gotten into?
She likes Spin TD and stuff, but
yeah.
I have never played those. Like, so it's not something I would suggest, and it's honestly something I didn't even think about. But that does make sense. I mean, why not? With these custom games, I mean, they can create their own tutorials and stuff, and different stacking, pulling, skill shot type games. Like, why not? Like there's a lot of ability there for the community to give back in a way. But I just think a lot of it is like, this is Valve's first rodeo with a MOBA, and it's a game that's so deep that like I don't think you realize how deep it is until like you're in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're still realizing
exactly
how deep it is.
And that's what I mean by that, is like,
yeah,
maybe at 10 hours or so, you're like, oh, so I just like pick Bloodseeker and like win, like, or like, oh, I just pick Sniper. Like, everyone has that hero that they started, and like that was just the thing you picked, and like it was easy, and you're not really playing Dota. You're just like slapping an ult on somebody and then right clicking kind of thing. But after those 1,000 hours,
overpowered.
Yeah, exactly. You go with what's overpowered.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to the game when it comes to balance and stuff that I feel like it takes almost that time to start to comprehend it. It's the curve, man. And it's a very, very steep curve that I would put at about 1,000 hours. And that's what I told Roland and Cyphus. And they're like, oh, I could never see myself playing a game that it takes 1,000 hours to like get into it. And it is a treacherous road up to that point. But I would put it at about 1,000 hours until you're like competent. And I think Purge in his guide, Welcome to Dota, You Suck, said it takes several months of playing. And like, if you're not really bad, then you'll just be kind of bad after that time. You know what I mean? And it's not like you're good by that point. It's just that you are starting to grasp all these intangibles
you're
that
bad at.
Yeah, exactly. You start to see. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you don't know, if you're new to the game and you don't know what you're doing wrong, there's no way to identify that is inherently wrong, right? You could be playing sniper and you could be playing him off lane every single game you play, and like you're 0 and 12, you're like, I don't know what's going on. Like I'm picking a hero. He's got range, right? Therefore, he'll be fine if he just sits back behind the tower and he can right click all he wants, and that's no problem, And you fall into that kind of logic because it makes sense in your head because no one has ever come to you and said, oh, well, that's why that's not working, things like that. So there's a lot of telling in the early guides, and there's not enough showing.
Yeah.
And I think that when they make more guides like that, it's going to make a big difference. But I don't want to harp too much on the point, but I'm looking at just trying to think collectively of what other things that we can do as a community to provide more interesting guides, because there's the Welcome to Dota You Suck with Purge, which is great. There's some YouTube video guides out there for stacking and pulling and other things like that. But I wonder, what I'd like to hear from other people who listen to the show who are more familiar with the other MOBAs, in particular, is hearing what they think about the tutorials on those MOBAs as opposed to Dota 2. We kind of live in a vacuum. I don't really play a lot of League of Legends, but I've played a little bit, and they do take a much more phased approach to learning, where you have to play a few games in the bot matches, and there's a lot more talking of the announcer to you. In Hearthstone, there's a little less going on. You don't have to worry about items, which is a huge element to the game. So that obviously makes it a little bit easier. And there's the whole objectives thing, and each map has its own cool little fun gimmicky objectives. So even if you don't know what you're doing, you at least can have fun by that this thing will make a bunch of bombs, and then it'll blow up that part of the map. So let's go do that. Like Dota 2 doesn't have that hook.
I'm going to channel my Ursi here, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say that League is just naturally a way less obtuse game in ways. Because you don't have the pulling, you don't have the denies, you don't have the turn radius. All these things that kind of are a pain in the ass for the player, or like a pain in the ass when you're getting denied, aren't there in League. I mean, they've taken out the experience, so it's just those teams against the teams, and you're not using the environment as much. One thing about Dota is just the use of the environment is pretty incredible. I mean, like, it's a PvE game as well, like unlike any other, because you can take advantage of all these maps, and it's a game of not wasting resources. So if someone isn't wasting those resources and they use them better than you, they win, hopefully, But with League, it's like you don't stack, you don't pull, you don't even block, right? They took blocking out of the game.
So I think the turn radius thing is a really good point, because that's another thing where, and also the way the roles work in League of Legends seems it's much more rigid than in Dota 2, which
you have strictly junglers. You have strictly these lane. Yeah, definitely.
It's part of the charm of Dota 2 in that there's this whole anything can work kind of mentality, where really in your average pub game of your average MMR, if you are good enough and you know a hero well enough, you can put him into any role and you could make it work. But with League of Legends, it's far more, it seems at least to be far more restrictive in terms of this guy is a jungler. He jungles. He either jungles or he goes top, and that's the most that happens with that person. And it's a little more cut and dry, which, while that makes it a less varied game, it makes it more accessible to someone who goes, oh, well, I see that this guy is, in the jungle a lot. Well, I'm just going to go try and do what he does, right? Much easier to replicate that and find guides specifically for that, as opposed to in Dota, where you could see in the pro games, you'd see a Nature's Prophet stuck in, or thrown in the off lane or in a solo lane carry, where you're like, wait, maybe I'll do that. I'm just going to demand to play solo carry lane Prophet.
It's fluid,
so I can get
is what you're saying. The game is
much more fluid.
It's way more fluid in the sense that, depending upon their lane, their off lane, or whatever, you could run something like a Nature's in the carry lane or something. You know what I mean? Like if it's a Darkseer or something. I don't know, weird example. But it's something that does work, and you see it to great success with some teams when they can kind of call out that draft and switch it up. But with League, I mean, like, and some of these other games, like, the rigidity in role is not fluid. This hero is there for that position. You don't have a lot of limiting factors, such as, like, you're losing EXP just because you're not as quick as the other guy or whatever. So they've tried to create, like, a more friendly experience, you know? And it's worked for them. I mean, it's the most popular game on the planet, right? But
Yeah,
I mean, it's not Dota.
It's worked for them.
It has worked for them. Like it's like, I mean, we've talked about this before, and we're probably not going to get into it too much. We've done shows on the topic, but where League seems to have tried to boil down all those MOBA elements and try to like create a very good, understandable process, Dota has like run ham wild with all that, all those mechanics and stuff, and they haven't tried to make it simpler. They until now really with some of this stuff, and
that's not even simpler. They just make sure that people are more aware that this is a mechanic, you know?
This is something that is integral to your success in the game.
Right. I wouldn't even say they've simplified the mechanics of the game. They've just made the mechanics more obvious to the person who's still interested in learning about them. You know, if you're not looking for those mechanics, you can still completely miss them. Even if you have played a couple hundred hours of Dota after this, if you haven't heard about this, recent change, there might be no reason for you to go into your settings menu and make that change, right? So
I do it.
Well, you do it because you put how many hours in this? It's just like it's a completely different like mindset that someone has to have to be as deprived or as depraved as we are to play this game and play it at such a to such an extent that we know each and every nook and cranny of the map and all of the pull timings and the spawn camps and things like that. I completely agree with you that it's something that Valve needs to work on, and I hope that this is one of many steps that they're taking. It seems like it is, but you still have weird things like Roshan timings, like knowing exactly how many minutes the window is for something to respawn is just kind of strange. And there's just so many other little things that I wonder if they're going to either take away or they're going to simplify. And I hope they don't take it away because, we've talked a lot about how the need for accessibility is there. What's something that, is there anything that you've seen changed recently that's made you go, no, I don't want that. I like it the way it is. You don't need to go and mix it up just for the sake of it.
My big gripes would just be responsiveness, honestly. Like, I feel like Valve, I mean, it shows what kind of company they are. Like, they're trying to improve their game immensely, but I mean, the game's been a mess in ways since Reborn came out. There's still like all this problem with quick casting and all that, where things aren't registering, and also just straight clicks not registering. Or, for instance, if I'm by a melee creep and a ranged creep, and I'm equidistant between both those creeps, why is it that I go to attack if I click on the ground, I'll go to attack the range creep every time? Or if I'm next to a melee creep and a siege creep, I will almost ignore that siege creep entirely. Like, it can be last hit, and I'll click on the ground, and I'll go and attack a new creep and lose the last hit. Yeah, like stuff like that doesn't feel consistent to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like why
sluggish?
Yeah. Why are these things? Why are some targets prioritized over others? And maybe I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily suggest like the same kind of tower change where you press Alt and it'll show you like what your hero is going to prioritize. Mm-hmm. But it just feels like that's one of those levels of obtuseness that doesn't really have an answer. It's just like it's that way because it is. And some of these are relics from how Dota 1 was designed and stuff like that. And so I don't know. It just feels inconsistent. It feels inconsistent that I would be attacking one creep and then just by clicking in that general area, not even close to the other one, I'll just turn and switch targets real fast. It feels unnecessarily obtuse when you should just like put the closest unit in range to be attacked or one you were already attacking. That would be my biggest gripe that I'm hoping to see a change for, honestly.
Yeah.
What about you?
I don't. For me, it's something that I'm not necessarily. It's not something I dislike, but it's something I worry that they're starting to get a little carried away with, and that is the addition of new items. And I appreciate the new items because I am a hardcore player, and it's hard to take myself out of that mindset. But when I do, and I have a friend of mine who's like, I don't know what the hell kind of item I'm supposed to get. There's like 60 different items here. What the hell am I? And each of them build into something. As soon as I said, yeah, there's 60 items, but also like some of them build into others. He's like, what?
Yeah.
Well, what? Why do I? So you're telling me I need to know not only what the item does now, but what could it do if it builds into another item? And I'm
Which
like,
seems so daunting at that level of
Right?
play, doesn't it? It's just
Exactly.
like, it's like, I'll never know this. I'll need to use a guide. But you start to see that there is some general logic with all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like slippers, what they build into, items that give you agi, all these stats items, like those stats roll into the new item and stuff like that. When you start to see that, or you see like a stout shield or a stout shield and one slipper on a jug, you know he's going to build that next item. And so like, it's pretty intelligent. I see what you're saying, but to a new player, it's completely
like when you're a new
clusterfuck.
player, the only item that would make sense is like Sanjin Yasha, right? You have one sword, you have the other sword, let's
And you
stick
click
those
them
two
together.
swords together.
Yeah.
Whoa, that looks super cool. I'm gonna buy that thing.
Good item.
Right?
It is.
Then you have like things like Tranquil Boots. Okay, I have a Ring of Regen. I have a Ring of Protection. I forget, is it Ring of Regen or Ring of Health? I always mix those two. It's Ring of Regen, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so you have Ring of Regen, gives you +2 health regeneration. Ring of Protection gives you +2 armor, and boots. All of a sudden, I move faster, and then I get I don't know, a ton of 12 HP regen. But if someone hits me one time, I don't get any of that regen.
That's a great
I don't
example.
Even get the base 2. You know, like, there's just like weird examples like that where you're like, why is that?
There is the different model or the little icon now, right? When the boots are broken or not. So
Yeah,
that helped.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
not that way when you and I were playing, though. Like, you just had to know, right?
I
Or
don't-
it was an activatable item? Do you
I
remember
don't
that?
know if it showed the cooldown before. I
Yeah.
think it showed a different image, but it didn't show the cooldown for it. I think in the past, but that was a while back. That's like one of our
Several years
old
ago.
grandpa Dota days.
It's
but,
funny you mentioned you didn't have any Dota friends, because I didn't either, man. Maybe that's why we're close.
Yeah, right.
Close,
'Cause we all had
close as
to figure
VD,
this
you know?
shit out on our own.
Yeah.
Watching a lot of Dota, and I think that's something that if we're going to talk about the negatives and what they're not doing right, or not.
I want to talk
right,
about one point on items real fast before
Yeah.
you say something.
Yeah,
And
go
that's it's almost like Valve and Ice Frog have an idea that they want to remove caps entirely from the game. And you saw this with move speed with the Moon Shard, or attack speed with the Moon Shard, and with range with the Dragon Lance. Now it's like heroes that have wicked range can get even wickeder range. You know, Aether Lens is another good example.
Yep.
Is that a good thing that you're just like removing all these limiters from the game? Is the idea to make the game shorter by increasing all these ranges? Like, what do you think? Is it a good thing?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it makes the game more Dota. So if you're one of those players who to quote a Wazoo phrase, it's the most Dota ever.
Yeah.
686, and that's exactly one of those perfect examples. Is that you have something that when you have these kind of regulations, I guess is for a lack of a better term, for how range works. If you have a general feel for how a lion stun works, and then all of a sudden he does it with way more range because he has Aether Lens, that's the difference between living and dying, and that can be incredibly frustrating as the other player. But you have to flip it on the other side and go, you know what, props to that guy. He has the knowledge to get an Aether Lens and take advantage of the range that he has, so he's going to get more out of the game because he has known more. So it just further balances the, I guess not balances, it further puts more on the knowledge scale in terms of what's going to make you a better player than necessarily the clicking around.
Yeah, I like that.
An inferior, micromanager, as long as you have the knowledge to know that Aether Lens is a good item at this timing and you can take advantage of it best with these heroes, then you're just going to be a better player. And I think that's a really cool part. But on that flip side, like you said, it just it breaks all of the mechanics that someone would have built up in their head when they're starting out.
Right. And it feels like it definitely helps some heroes scale more. I mean, how irrelevant could a Pudge become late game? You know what I mean? Like, sure, you had like the Flesh Heap and the tank, but like your hook was the same. People have blink daggers by that time and pretty much can just blink on top of you. Now with the lens, you can actually kind of scale. The hook scales a bit more. You know what I mean? Because you can pull from greater distances and they can't see you.
You know what? This brings up an interesting idea. I wonder if there's items out there in other MOBAs that work like Aghanim Scepter, and not necessarily an item that just changes the way an ability works on a hero, but the number of heroes that this item impacts is incredible, and it's growing every single patch in ways that is completely different based on the hero, right? Sand King all of a sudden has a longer burrow strike, and it adds Caustic Finale. Wind Ranger, it doesn't necessarily make her ability stronger. It just adds her right click, makes her right click better when she uses focus fire. For Lion, he has a bigger AOE.
That's a really good point. I just wonder if they didn't even need to add in the Dragon Lance or the Aether Lance and just keep it as like an Ags upgrade or something. You know what I mean? Like make it that much more of a valued item. Because it gives stats too.
Or like leave those weird interactions to the item that's all about weird interactions nowadays.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that could have just been that item. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That was the weird interaction item. But interesting point on items and accessibility. I like that. I like where that conversation went. Did you have anything else to add before we move on?
Yeah, I guess the last thing I wanted to cover was just talking about accessibility. I've complained a lot on the show about lack of accessibility in Dota 2 and ways it can improve on a user guide level, right? I'm a guy who works in IT, so documentation and like more interactive user guides is something I actually do for a job. So it's always frustrating to see when it's not being done in like a really nice, snappy way. But on the other hand, I can also empathize at how complex something like this game is and how hard that can be. But one thing I can really appreciate that they're doing is by emphasizing esports and making esports, Dota 2 esports, more interesting and storylines more interesting. They're hooking players in, and I don't know about you, but the most I ever learned was just by watching TI3 from start to finish.
Yeah,
I learned so much before I even picked up my first match.
I didn't even know what an offlane was before TI3, to be honest.
Right,
I didn't know offlane, safe lane. Like, I knew mid, of course.
What's the hard lane? What's the safe lane?
Yeah, I didn't understand those conceptually until TI. And, that's one of the reasons these casters have escalated to such, fame, is because they are this gateway into so much information for so many people. I mean, look at Blitz, look at Purge, look at Capitalist. I mean, all these people are very good at breaking these terms down, because they put so much time into the game. But that still doesn't solve the problem of accessibility, because it's something that how much, like you said, the player that plays one game every couple weeks, how likely are they to stay up way late and watch Shanghai Major or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we could get into another
learn more about.
We could get into even
on those players.
Yeah. It even pulls up another point, which is all these stream problems and stuff like that are a possible deterrent to those new players tuning in. But, that's a conversation for another time. And, I don't know. That's a very good point. I feel like the casters and all that have been integral to the growth of the scene. Without them, there probably wouldn't be a Dota scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the Dota scene itself, it kind of feeds off each other, right? You have your Dota scene, and that helps build up the player base. The player base grows, is able to put more into your TIs, into your crowd-funded tournaments, your compendiums, and the fact that we have compendiums is just such a cool thing. And I just want to make sure I'm conveying how much I appreciate that they add those things into the game, because it is another route of accessibility where. For me, I'm a huge sports fan, so that was the first thing that immediately caught my eye, was the fact that this is really a valid sport, and it has its own merits on that level. And the more I can learn about it through that kind of sports prism, as a discipline, and as someone. My boss is a huge golf fan, right? So he's constantly watching the PGA. He's constantly studying up on what these guys are doing and what kind of clubs they're using in different situations, and how their swings are, and measuring that up against himself and things like that. And then that's really similar to how a lot of us approach Dota, right? Is we idolize our guys, our hard carries. For me, it's the guys I've been getting into lately is Kazoo's stream on Twitch. It's an offlaner from Europe who's former Han player, actually, and I've been really enjoying watching him play, and I've been drawing inspiration from him. So I've been playing a lot of Beastmaster and Faceless Void. So those are heroes that he's been playing recently and playing a lot of on his stream, and I've been trying to take what he does and replicate it for myself. So that's another kind of gateway to accessibility that I really hope people, if they don't take advantage of now, try to approach it like that, especially if you're a sports fan.
Yeah. Even though you patted yourself on the back so much that it hurt your arm yesterday on your Chronos.
Dude.
That feeling when the Chronos just right, dude. That meme where he's holding up the OK when the Chronos just right, dude. Your Chronos are really, really good, dude. Next level stuff. I'm glad that you've been learning from Kazu and me, of course. Like,
Of course.
like me missing them so much, you knew where not to put them. So. But I don't know. Do you have anything else to add before we close out the show? We've covered a lot of what we wanted to.
People can expect some changes to the in-house formats on the horizon in the next season, and that we're formulating them, and we are, it's an incredible thing what people have been doing twice a week now for the last few weeks, just coming together and having some fun, playing some Dota, playing against us, playing with us. I've been able to cast the games with my boy ZD and AG47, and I've been really enjoying that, and I look forward to doing that in future seasons. And just shout out to all the folks participating in the in-houses, and that's it.
I also want to thank Roland, Cyphus, Grouty, Blackheart, ZD, AG47, Kaios. Yeah, I just want to thank all these guys. They put in a ton of time, guys. Every single week, and you, of course. I mean, you've casted your fair share. Lots of other people have casted as well. Thank you guys for making this community a better place and helping people kind of get acclimated to such a community. Like, this thing is really blown up in terms of like the in-houses and stuff, and a lot of work's gone into it. None of which was mine, but I just wanted to say thank you to all those people. And Blue, where can people find you?
You find me at .p_Mr. Blue on Twitter. You can find the .p YouTube channel where you can catch VODs of the in-houses and, among other things, the .p_Roland Jungle Book guides. On,
what was that,
YouTube.
Like a bassoon you just played?
Yeah, I'm trying to make the noise of the dying trumpet or whatever that meme is that people that soundboard that the Pudge guy on Arteezy's stream used.
That was so hilarious.
Yeah, the sort of ultimate fail fish horn. But anyways, you can find that at youtube.com/.ptv1 for more great Dota 2 content, and also Roland's Jungle Book.
Yeah, that's something you got to see to believe, the Roland's Jungle Book.
That's the thing.
Yep. But I am the host of the show, obviously. I am the Grand Wazoo, and you can find me at .p_Wazoo on Twitter. I'm literally nowhere else. I'm a phantom, internet phantom.
You're a void.
Yeah, faceless void. I do have a face. I don't have a chin, though. Chinless face void. But thanks for joining us, guys. It's been a good episode. We really enjoyed putting these out for you. You can tweet at us at .p_show to, say you suck, say you're great, or just join in on the conversation. We usually have a pretty good roll going. Speaking of which, have to shout out to my boy Fafnir as well. I mean, he's put in some work as well. So glad I did not forget him. You can find the Twitch channel at .ptv, right? It's not no one on that one. It's so confusing. So check that out. In-house is Thursday and Saturday, and we hope you join in, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay hard, stay classy, and stay out of my spawn box.